Yeah.
Okay, I'm hitting the Blue Girl Live button. And we're live. It's Tuesday, May 18th, 5:03 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:03 p.m. in Michigan?
No. We are Eastern Time Zone. It's very western edge of the Eastern Time Zone.
Yeah,
God damn it. This is the second time I've mixed up time zones in the past couple of days.
Who knows that is Scott. Scott knows that.
Yeah, that's right. So I remember when I decided to go to Michigan to teach, which was 2005. Sam Zakharov saw me, and he said, "Have you just he said, I heard you're going to Michigan." I said, "Yeah," and he said, "The best thing about Michigan is the fact that it's Ann Arbor, is that it's the most west you can be in the Eastern Time Zone, so it stays light that much later." And I said, "That's the best thing you can say." And then he said, the second one was, and also the airport's really close. I said, "Okay, so that means you can leave."
I will say, I hope you found the same. I think it is lovely here. And Julian is in the waiting room, Kate, somewhere.
Okay, I thought I have been like checking, but I missed. So
he's texting me saying, "Help."
Okay, what is his login? What is his name? Is it just Jay? That's the only thing that I'm coming up with.
Let me ask him.
Julian. I can see all three of you. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Is he just Jay? I think he might just be Jay.
J.D. Mortenson is what he says.
Oh, God. Well, God damn it. I've been typing in J. Okay. Nope. Jade. Okay.
So, Scott, it's good to actually meet you. I mean,
wait, is this a joke? Wait. Do you guys haven't met each other?
Not in person.
No,
wow, this is some.
I'm sorry. Can you hear that beeping?
Oh yeah.
Yes, very much. It is like some real not Ann Arbor noise. That's happening right now.
Okay. So no, I did see Nick. Nick gave a talk at Columbia Law School once.
Oh, you were there.
I was there, and there was so much law being spoken, and I still liked you.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, well, you were. I really appreciate. I mean, actually, one of the things I would love to talk to you guys about is what is it like to really like the law. Because I'm getting a sense. Kate, are you like me? Like you find law really interesting? You're not so well. Let me just say about me, and then you can say whether you agree with it. I think law is really interesting. I don't think the law is interesting.
I see. So you like the abstraction. You don't like the actual 18 USC 2254.
Oh, I hate that shit.
That's right. Yes,
I hate that shit. Yeah,
it's really power. It's power. It's like a code. If you figure it out, you can then navigate it and make cool moves and get what you need and get what you want. I mean, that's cool.
Well, I have no doubt that I can figure it out. I just don't care to. It's just. I mean,
because you could also learn the piano or classical guitar.
There or jazz or lots of
we also don't know how your recital went, so we'll have to talk about that at some point. But we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we have two University of Michigan law professors, Nicholas Bagley and Julian Mortensen. I'm muting you, Scott, because you're very beepy. Julian, it is great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
Oh, good. I was
back. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, Julian, we got it. You two look like brothers in the comments already.
That's
calumny. Literally cannot tell us apart.
Calumny.
Oh my God. I really love that Scott is in a cab. You two are identical twins, separated at birth. And I am just like, hi, making sure this isn't a mantle. So I will say that I have this is like the only thing that like about Michigan that like I don't know if I've told you this, Nick. Did I ever tell you that? I think I might have when I interviewed at UMich when I was on the market, but like I almost went to Michigan. Like I got
as a
in.
law student?
Yeah. It was like I got in when I was at Brown my senior year, and then law was like had double majored and was like kind of losing my mind and was like, I cannot go back into another like huge like kind of funnel of academia and stress. And so I was like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go make no money as a journalist for 3 years in New York City. My parents were thrilled. I'd gotten into Michigan. They were like, holy crap. Like, what are you thinking? Like not going to Michigan law school. And I was like, well, I can defer. And they're letting me defer for a couple of years. And then the entire bottom fell out. So this was 2006, which would have meant that I graduated in 2009.
Oh,
and
you
so
yeah, it was good to put
I
that
actually got really lucky. Like I was like, oh man, I would have been in a lost class of people. But then ended up having to just like reapply wholesale to like law school, and as everyone else did to escape the recession, and everything went kind of hangwire. But yeah, no, I love Michigan so much, and it's just like such a great place.
Yeah, it's an amazing place.
Way better than Yale.
Scott left.
He can't respond. Hold on, I'll unmute you, Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
So as a matter of fact, my son is going to Michigan college, university.
Cool.
So you better be nice to me because I'm going to be in your face for the next 4 years.
You're welcome to come over.
The other side of this sweatshirt is a Yale sweatshirt. I'm so embarrassed about it that I turned it inside out.
Go blue. Go blue.
Go blue.
Go blue indeed.
So we were going to first take a vote on promoting me to partnership, but instead I was thinking that maybe I would love to talk to you guys about your co-authorship kind of relationship. This is something I have not gotten to pick apart with like a lot of law professors, frankly. It's kind of a private thing, so you can like, maybe it's not, but like I'm kind of interested. I also want to know if Scott can talk about it with Ona, because he and Ona wrote this entire giant book, obviously, that was incredible. And like, I just kind of am really curious, like, just from a procedural standpoint, like, how do you guys begin? And I'm just kind of, and then like, let's go from there.
Arguing.
Really?
I'm only slightly kidding. I mean, I don't know if this is the same for Scott or generalizable or what have you, but the collaboration begins with conversations, and conversations that are interesting enough to have differing perspectives on and to disagree about and to dive into and to swap back and forth over, I think, years, talking about non-delegation and how to think about it in relation to the historical claims being made about it. It wasn't something that we sat down and said, hey, we should write a paper together. It was a paper we'd sort of had on the back burner for, I don't know, for a while anyway. And
my recollection, Julian, is so Julian has a big, important project on the meaning of executive power in Article 2, and he kind of came across a bunch of evidence that he thought bore on this non-delegation question. And he wasn't at the time, I think, totally like teched up on like where the non-delegation debate was, and he didn't have any time to write the darn thing, he thought. So he said, is this something we should do together? And I was like, kind of like, no, that sounds lame. But then I was like, fine, I guess you're a friend. And the kind of spun out from there. And really, over the past, 2.5 years, it's been a lot of emotional labor on my part to bring him along. There's always somebody carrying the project, right?
By the way, Nick, I so know what you mean. Just between us.
So for everyone that is not a lawyer, can you explain really quickly like non-delegation doctrine? Like I have to imagine that you can explain this to law students, so you can explain it to us. So
it's the idea that Congress is constitutionally forbidden from passing certain laws that delegate certain kinds of power or too much power to the president. And that sounds a little abstract. So you can make it concrete by saying, when Congress wants to do environmental regulation, it doesn't like write the environmental rules all itself. It couldn't possibly manage. It's much too complicated. It's much too detailed. And so it drafts in pretty broad strokes saying, hey, EPA, could you, adopt some rules that protect the public health, please? And EPA, does its thing. And the people who are advocating for a robust version of the non-delegation doctrine want to say, oh, all of those laws, they're all unconstitutional. And instead, Congress has to make all of the decisions, or at least the important ones, or maybe, there are a bunch of categories that they've kind of spun out about like which laws Congress is supposedly not able to adopt. And our project, for those of you who aren't, deep in the weeds on this stuff, basically says that the claims the non-delegation doctrine existed at the moment of the founding, which are very common in right-wing legal circles, they're bullshit. I mean, they're like complete and total horseshit. They're based on nothing. That's the project. We don't use that word, though.
Oh, but you should. Like, I feel like, so this is an incredible project, and I feel like it's going to kind of, what are the ramifications going to be, not just for the executive power, but for administrative law?
Ramifications around adoption of the doctrine in a more serious, hard-edged way, or ramifications of listening to reason and truth?
Well, kind of both. Like, I'm actually very interested in, like, if you speak reason and truth, like, fine, but like, yes, both of those things. Like, also, like, the DC circuit is a pretty, I don't know. What do you think about, like, what's going to happen, what the DC circuit's reaction is going to be to kind of what you guys are writing?
I've always liked Nick's take on the move here, the move of pushing non-delegation as a constraint, especially when paired with the suggestion that all you have to do is add a little more, maybe a substantial amount more, depending on the statute, guidance and constraint, and it'll be an okay enactment. That puts a blind eye or closes an eye to the reality of just how hard it is to enact legislation, to enact legislative reform, veto gates, as the political scientists call it. So that's one. And two, it is also part of a larger agenda to set the bar for valid regulatory structures so high that no regulations get set at all. Now, I want to separate out the distinction, which is a real distinction for many people, I think, in the debate between historical claims and political agenda. I think that in terms of the use to which these claims about the history have been weaponized, the game isn't actually ultimately about, add a little more specification. The game is about, you're not going to get another law passed, one, and two, even if you could get it passed, the kind of specification you have to put in would require so much detail that you're not going to be able to get a law passed, and so we're going to have less total regulation. I think that I'm sort of borrowing things that Nick has said before, so I should let him say them, but I
can tell you the one place where we've seen an actual statute struck down under the non-delegation doctrine in recent years has been here in Michigan, where the Michigan Supreme Court struck down the governor's emergency powers because they said, well, the legislature wasn't specific enough about what those powers ought to entail. And that was a decision, a 4-3 Republican Democrat decision for all sorts of highly partisan reasons. It is you get all these claims about how the non-delegation doctrine is all about good government, but it's really hard to see how that's the case. It's about arming courts to throw a big wrench into the workings of the administrative and regulatory state in a manner that just yields less regulation, which if that's your political agenda, cool. Our project is just saying, look, as a matter of like originalism, which is the trappings that Justice Gorsuch has used to like advance this view in the Supreme Court, it's just not true.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Like, who wrote the first draft?
Different parts.
Was it parts? Was like different parts? Did you each write a section and then you kind of sewed them together?
Yeah, I did like the intro stuff. Then Julian did like the pre-ratification stuff, and then I did the post-ratification stuff. Roughly, I mean, like some of these bits and pieces get mixed up, but that's roughly what it was like. So,
I mean, I know almost nothing about like this area of law. It is, as Scott jokingly said, like it's like knowing the 18 USC, whatever. And but
That stuff is fascinating, by the way. We should talk about that later because I want to push back on the idea. It's not interesting.
No, because
But
I
not right
actually, I actually was thinking that maybe we should push back on that right now, because I was thinking that like part of what I feel like you guys are showing with your work is this amount of like, there has been this, obviously I grew up with, you were schooled in as well, I'm sure, like a level of legal realism, or like certain legal realists like giving you kind of some type of, there's originalism, legal realism, like there's all of these things. I would say that like my legal realism is almost like and we were talking about this yesterday with like Leah and Steve on the podcast, at like a very kind of almost nihilistic point, whereas that I am so frustrated by the lack of intellectual honesty and the move to politics or the move to history that is not rigorous or like by design, like
it's a pretext.
It's pretext. Thank you. It's pretext. And so there's just like, I have this very deep kind of struggle internally as a lawyer and a law professor of like, I go and teach this stuff to my students and I do this, and most of them are going to become real practitioners, as you said, like Nick, as we were like chatting before, like they're going to write wills and they're going to do real estate transactions. And like, this is going to be a real thing for them. And I like, that's the world I grew up in. But there is also the world that I have now been trained in which I have a very deep skepticism of these institutions, and that they, and especially I think probably after Trump, that they obey like the rule of law in some type of like way that we would consider consistent. And so I guess like part of like the non-delegation stuff that hits me is like, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a finger in the dike of like trying to kind of like keep all of this from collapsing around us. And I will say that like my favorite moment in a class, my last seminar in 3L when I was with Mike Seidman in class, and he was like, yep, well, it's super flawed, but it's the best thing we've got. And I was like, yep. And I mean, like, and so I do think that this is the best thing we've got, but like, what do we do? Like, what is your kind of, what is the takeaway of this piece going to be, and how you're thinking about this? Do you have any idea?
I mean, like, it's not going to change the world. I'd like it to. I mean, like, I'd love it if somebody who had like a staunch methodological commitment to originalism read our work and was like, yes, they're right, we're done with this whole thing. But the fact is, the conservative legal movement has a legal reform project. And like, that reform project entails like squeezing the size and scope of the federal state, right? Like, they want to get rid of a lot of what we think of as the administrative and regulatory state. And that's a fine goal to have, I suppose. It's one that I disagree with. But, you know, do I think they're going to abandon that political goal because a couple of obnoxious University of Michigan professors said they should?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can I just ask? First of all, can I just say that I'm experiencing intense motion sickness right now. Because so it was like staring at the thing while the cat was like going all over the place.
I so understand that,
yeah.
Scott. Sorry, I get motion sick all the time. It's like,
yeah, I know. I can't even be on like the goddamn swings without wanting to.
Me neither.
I'm with you.
It's really because I thought that would be the one good thing about having little kids when they were little, and then I couldn't even go on the swings because it made me. But so can I ask
swings, Scott?
So let me ask you about you said that the Michigan Supreme Court struck down some regulation on the basis of non-delegation. Yeah. Okay. Has the U.S. Supreme Court done that? I mean, in the last 20 years.
Not yet.
No. Okay. So what do you forecast as the risk that the court may actually there? It's like once you go there, it's really hard to see how you stop.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is like, I think of it as like tampering with the firmware of a computer. Like it's it's like just it's fucking with something so deep that like once you do it, like nothing runs right. And like I think that's kind of the point, to be honest. I worry a lot about the way that constitutional avoidance is going to be deployed in the lower courts. You've already seen this. The litigation over the CDC eviction order is the place you see it most. But where the courts are saying, we're going to read this statute narrowly, because if we read it broadly, like the government would prefer, it would raise non-delegation concerns. And like you do avoidance enough, and you just start clipping agencies' wings, and agencies get skittish, and they stop. Like they're like, oh, we can't do that. I mean, I can't tell you like how much it just worries me that a bunch of like risk-averse lawyers are going to be telling their bosses, like, you can't do the thing that it's important to do to protect the environment, to save lives, to get lead out of the water, like, because we're really worried about some asshole court invoking this doctrine to like trim down on your authority more generally.
Julian, I don't want to. Do you want to add anything?
No, I think that sort of covers the principal risks. I mean, it's interesting actually to think about this court and what its likely approach is going to be. I think clearly constitutional avoidance is going to be a lever available to lower courts throughout the system, and it's available to the Supreme Court too. But after the latest grant on the abortion question, I'd sort of been of the school that thought that the approach to the abortion doctrine to the abortion situation would be to nibble away under the surface in ways that wouldn't make it obvious that Roe versus Wade was being overruled. We don't know that that's going to happen now, but this recent grant leaves me thinking that maybe there's more appetite in the controlling majority for big sort of earth-shaking doctrinal moves that announce themselves as such than I thought.
So I think yesterday was the 67th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, and
the century is enough, Kate.
What I'm really what's wrong with 2/3? Like, just because it's an irrational number, like, come on, we're all a little bit irrational. But seriously, like I don't know, like I saw this kind of thing and I was thinking about this as the Roe thing came up, and I was thinking about how I learned Brown and Roe in my Con Law 2 classes, and both as kind of these sharp departures. Well, Brown, from stare decisis, and then like other types of I don't know, kind of very strong, broad moments for liberal-minded people in the court. And I just don't understand, like, how, I don't know. I don't think that either side wins in this kind of, like, this back and forthism. And I don't know that there is, like, I wonder sometimes, I'm like, well, like, maybe if we like made the country smaller and allowed states to pick what they wanted to do. Oh, wait, we did that. And this is where we are now. So, like, I just kind of, I don't know. I'm just, the entire structure of things seems sometimes, I don't know. I grew up, maybe my entire world was ruined by Aaron Sorkin and The West Wing. Like, I thought that things were like a big wheel of cheese, and like that this was all going to be like hunky-dory, and that there was this grand thing to aspire to, which was, you know, the West Wing and the executive branch and everything else. And it just is not. It just is not at all.
I begin con law every year by saying, like, the most important principle you learn from the class is that the Constitution is not one big wheel of cheese. What did you mean by that, Kate? What is that expression, a wheel of cheese?
Oh, sorry. This is if you're a West Wing fan. There used to be a famous episode called The Wheel of Cheese Day, like the Big Cheese Day, which was like that. It was supposedly like a day when everyone came and got to like get a piece of cheese and have their like off this giant wheel and have their say to the government and like talk to their legislator like about things. And like there's this whole episode about it. And it's it is an extremely naive and idealistic episode of all of like the very idealistic episodes. But like this
do you guys not know this?
This is like a whole
I
thing.
didn't know that.
Not that
Okay.
specific.
speaking about naive and unrealistic and wanting too much cheese, could we talk about Stephen Breyer's new book?
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, seriously. The authority of the court and the perils of politics, or why I don't have to retire. No, actually, why not retiring is upholding the authority of the court. If he were to retire, that would impugn the court because it would show that politics was involved. What the heck?
Julian had a nice long post about this today. I'm with you, Scott. I think it's crap.
I can't even believe he's allowed to write a book I know they always do, but this book in particular seems
the First Amendment, read it.
The Breyers of the world the Breyers of the world, I don't know. It's like the inside perspective and the outside perspective, and I'm terrified to even start talking about what it means to talk about law in front of a legal philosopher who actually knows what he's doing. But the reporting from the front lines, a whole bunch of judges feel the way that Breyer does. I don't think that the first leg of his reasoning is off base as a description of the judge's subjective experience of what it means to judge, and that there's a broad range of methodological priors and views on stare decisis and doesn't mean that the judges I want to be careful that many judges don't experience themselves as engaged in a technocratic, if sometimes baffling and underdetermined enterprise to identify what the best answer to a given question is. And judges will be the first people who say this is hard and sometimes the answer is not clear. But all of that, for me, has literally nothing to do with retirement decisions or with how we talk about nominations. You can grant the genuine craftsmanship involved, and I do actually, and you can grant the aspiration so often fallen short of to make at least some aspects of what courts do technocratic in nature in the sense of working through a problem that has better and worse answers. But that doesn't mean that you don't get to talk about how different approaches to the enterprise produce different predictable policy results when you're deciding who's going to be the judge. The two pieces just don't fit together for me. And I'm used to the argument actually coming from people who are trying to insulate the judicial nomination process from any serious engagement during conversations about what a given judge is likely to do when she's on the bench.
Yeah, I think the way you put it is exactly right. Regardless of what you think about the autonomy of law, in terms of whether the content of law is determined by politics, whether there's a sharp divide between law and politics, and nothing to do with whether you should retire, when you're a zillion years old, when there's a Democratic president, and that there's been a court packing in previous years. But it's also particularly rich coming from Stephen Breyer, who wrote a book called Act of Liberty, which, as far as I know, cannot be understood unless you're just reading his own political vision of what he wants into the Constitution, because as far as I could tell, Act of Liberty is just a placeholder term for what Stephen Breyer wants. I respect Justice Breyer. This is, I think, criticism of you. So I don't want to,
let me criticize Stephen Breyer a little bit.
Sure.
Leave right now. We're not gonna hear this kind of thing.
Because I think
censor you.
I think the risk of the job is that you start to believe the crap people say about you, that you're important and enlightened. And to be honest, Stephen Breyer is a replacement level Democratic nominee to the Supreme Court. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's great. He's smart, but anybody who'd replace him would be smart as well.
He's never been a standout justice.
Now I think the story, but then you get into the world where he's telling himself stories. And I bet the story that he's telling himself is, I can work with the chief and with Kavanaugh. I can work with them. I can find areas of overlap and try to pull them to the left. And only I can do it, because if it's not me, it's going to be some rabid liberal who doesn't have the sense of coalition building of the established relationships. And I think that's mostly self-regard talking. And I would like to see him retire for the good of the country. I think look, Leahy could die tomorrow. Any one of them could die tomorrow.
They're so old. Sorry, they really are.
So
like, no, they're so old.
Fucking gerontocracy. So, like,
Yeah.
get out of the way. I mean, you can't look at the list of people who might replace him and think, like, they won't be up to the task. Leandra Kruger? You got to be kidding me. She could do this in a walk, right? Like, she'd be great. The notion that somehow she's not up to the task of filling his shoes, like, I find that repellent.
I just want to say for one moment that something that rarely gets said in these high level conversations with like elite like people in them, which is that like not all judges are federal judges.
Yeah.
And so both of my parents, my dad was a town judge and my mom was a state Supreme Court judge in New York State, so a state trial level judge for 26 years. And she ran for election. She had a 14-year term, and there was like all kinds of politics involved in her getting elected that were very different and that were also she was also insulated from because she had a 14-year term. And so there are all of these various types of things. And I just want to say that, like, my entire life, I've watched people come up to my parents, my mom, who is like this, like, literal torts medical malpractice judge, and my dad, who hears like fucking DUIs and like eviction notices and like be like, so you're a judge. How do you feel about Scalia? You're a judge. How do you feel about, like, and it's just kind of like, can I just say like that this is like, I actually hate this. There was a, I think that the complete disregard that the elite law school has for state level decisions and state level decisions and state level thinking, and like only couching things when they reach a federal level is so deleterious to law school and like to law practice in general, where, okay, yes, like if you're in Michigan, there's like a 1/3 chance you're only ever going to be dealing with the federal bench as you like leave. And like at Yale, it's like maybe like a 3/4 chance you're only going to be dealing with a federal bench when you put like at St. John's, like it's like almost like no one's going to go in before the federal court for like the first couple of years. Like there's no way. And like, I feel almost like there's this level in which there's no conversation around so as much as I want to even talk about Breyer, like, and everything else, I'm kind of like, God, like, fuck you for sucking up the oxygen around judging and like what it means to be a judge. And like, the entire bench around like all of this politics, like it makes people think that all judges are like this, that all judges are political like this, that they all work like the Supreme Court. I will never forget being in 3rd grade campaigning with my mom and then being like, your mom's going to the Supreme Court. Does this mean you have to move to DC? And I was like, no, lady, like as I eat my corn dog, like, New York courts
are confusingly named. I mean, like, let's give them that, right?
That is fair. But I just do want to say that this is a bizarre, this is part of another kind of bizarre structure of like of lawyering and like law professoring.
Well, your colleague and who my friend and also colleague Gabe Menlo, he when he graduated Yale, he clerked for a state Supreme Court justice under the theory that he wanted to learn how real law works. So people do make that choice, though. I'll point out that he's a philosopher, so he's unusually rational. Yeah.
I don't
specifically know. State criminal law, right? Substantive state criminal law. I mean, that was. I just think it's Gabe's
so few crimes
in so many ways, and like that commitment. The thing that matters is very characteristic. It's very smart.
If they ever personally encounter the legal system, like anything that affects their lives, divorce, death, custody disputes, like anything they actually care about that really matters to them, it's all going to be channeled through the state courts. I teach Civ Pro, and I have to apologize right in the very first class, and I do it every time I teach it, for teaching the federal rules of civil procedure, as if like those are the rules they're going to be tangling with most of the time. And I can justify it as like, this is the one that applies across the country in the federal courts, and the state systems are not so different. But it's kind of a thin justification, and I feel it. I think you're exactly right, Kate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. We're going to start with Chris Ardress. Chris, the floor is yours.
Hi, I thought there was too much Michigan on the show, so I had to bring out my.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, you guys kind of previewed my question, which was about Breyer. There was a column out in the Washington Post today, which called him a deluded institutionalist for thinking that he was above politics.
Harsh but fair.
So I wondered whether you guys just you talked about this already, but whether you think that a judge who has a lifetime tenure should consider the politics, like the political situation when they retire. There are certainly, like you said, there are plenty of judges who could fill his shoes. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was one of his clerks, so she could easily step into that role and fill those shoes. So I'd sort of what you think about judges thinking that they're above politics when, maybe just if you don't consider that yourself being political, then if you don't, the expression was, if you don't take an interest in politics, it doesn't mean that politics won't take an interest in you.
I think if you take seriously the idea that nominations are political in every sense of the word, that the idea of nominating just on the basis of the pure search of truth in the one true law, and I don't know how it's possible to avoid thinking about nominations that way, then I really have a hard time to thinking that the flip side or the far end of the process, retirements, ought to be thought of as differently. When you're a judge and you're judging, that is, again, maybe this is aspirational, maybe I tend to be naive or whatever you want to say about the possibility of integrity in judging. But, in role as a judge, you're trying to figure out what your best understanding of the various sources of legal meaning say about a given case. But when you leave the bench, it's a political decision. I don't actually understand the view on which it would make any sense to say he shouldn't think about who's going to replace him when he's departing from a position in government in a representative democracy. I actually don't get it.
It's a really smart observation. I love that. I think that that's great. We act like it's a personal choice, and it's like absolutely not a person. It's not like retiring. It's not like retiring.
Man, if only there was a recent example of somebody who hung on to the Supreme Court too long and ended up doing serious damage to her lungs.
I don't think we should do thought experiments.
Yeah, no, keep it out of the range of the hypothetical.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're sick of trolley problems here, and
I'm sorry. I received.
Trolley problems just in time for Daniel. Nice to see you, Daniel.
Hello. So I have a question, I suppose, regarding administrative law. It's two parts. What's the risk of the 1984 Chevron decision getting overturned within the next decade, and what would be the implications of that?
Great question.
I don't know, Julian. My view is something on the order of like.
Well, can you explain to people what Chevron is first?
Yeah.
That was
People
good
don't know Chevron
right there.
I've explained it in the chat a couple of weeks ago, but they might
highly complex issues of oil and gas law. The first thing you have to understand is about the difference between extraction. No,
I'm joking. I was like, what? What Chevron did I explain?
Chevron is a decision involving Chevron, where the Supreme Court said that when you got a statute that an agency administers, like an environmental statute, and the statute's ambiguous, we're going to defer to the agency about what that statute means, because the agency knows way more about its statute than we do, and it knows way more about how that statute ought to work than we do. And so we're going to give it the responsibility to make that call. And so there has been, Justice Gorsuch is sort of the most prominent advocate of the view that we should just torch Chevron deference. And the effect of that would be to give to the judiciary a whole lot more room to say what statutes mean, and to strip agencies of some of the traditional power they've had to say, no, actually, this ambiguity really ought to be resolved in this way, or it's going to cause us a real headache, and we can't achieve the job that Congress tasked for us.
Can I just quickly insert like a question that
Sure.
I genuinely have? Why would anyone ever want to get, if you were a judicial body, why would you ever want to get rid of Chevron deference? It makes your life so much fucking easier. Like,
yeah, the famous story about Chevron was Justice Stevens, who, even when I clerked for him, said he didn't think Chevron was a big deal. The famous quote is that, like, he said, when I'm confused, I just go with the agency.
Right? Because, they substantively know. They're in a better position to know than you are.
I think most of the time that's what would happen even without Chevron. So to answer the first question, or the second question, like the practical consequences may be less acute than people fear, because judges are mostly going to side with an agency that's being reasonable. The times they won't are often going to be those high-profile political cases where your sort of judicial libido is engaged in like, oh, I want to push back on the EPA or the NLRB because they're doing something I don't like, and I think they shouldn't be allowed to do it. Which is to say, I think the effect would be to heighten partisanship and partisan decisions on the court on some margin that's hard to predict. In terms of how likely it is, I think it's more likely the court will just chip away at it, right? This is a version of are they going to overrule Roe or just sort of undermine it over time? I think they'll just undermine it. I would say it's like a 20 to 30% chance they're going to overrule it, and maybe more like 70 to 80% chance they won't. But I don't know, Julian, am I being too optimistic?
Oh, I'm terrible at tea leaves. I don't know. I mean, I'm also, I sort of feel so dramatically less confident in any of my predictions about what judges are likely to do over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm sure 30 to 70%. That sounds, I'll run with that. I mean, one of the interesting things about Chevron to me is there's lots of ways to think about the reasons for deferring. I love the sort of the unstated bite of Kate's question about why would you want to take on the project of figuring this out for yourself in the first instance. And that's right, but like there's something even like a step further substantive about that, which is I think a lot of the time, and I don't know for sure across all subject area specific disciplines, but you talk to lawyers who specialize in something, ERISA or antitrust, or and I'll speak from an area that I work a lot in, arbitration law. And there's an abiding frustration with how the Supreme Court messes up the doctrine every time they get their hands in it, because they don't get it. And again, maybe this is in part a comment or a criticism on the individual capacity of the judges in the panel deciding the decision, but I think it's more a comment about what it means to actually deeply understand an area of the law, such that somebody who just swoops in for 30 days of thinking about it and swoops back out again until maybe a couple of years later just isn't going to actually understand over the run of cases what the implications of moving this bar here. And I don't mean only, certainly including, but not only the practical implications, but the doctrinal implications, but whether what emerges makes sense. And these people like, I can't believe the Supreme Court just messed this up. Circle all back to, you have an agency that's responsible for administering a statute. The Gorsuch position is that it doesn't make sense to think of an agency as administering a statute because statute is law and law is what courts do. But, courts mess up law all the time because they don't work with the area they're assessing enough. And so if you have at least some reason at the margins to think that the decision maker from whom the decision is emerging isn't completely biased towards one side or the other of the equation over time, deference is about not messing up the law as much as it with your purist and likely is not misguided instincts on what would really be the smartest thing to do. I don't know. I think of it in some ways as a very pragmatic statement about how easy it is to mess things up as much as it is about sort of, maybe more cynically avoiding work.
Julian, I love that. I didn't mean cynically avoiding work. I did mean that they would mess it up. And one of the things that when I was clerking in the Second Circuit, that I had a huge fight over a summary order, which is just a non-precedential opinion, but that had conflated two substantial similarity tests, that two a defense substantial similarity and the actual. Anyways, you understand what I mean. But there was whoever had written this, the clerk had written this opinion, had conflated the cases from the two and made them seem like they were the same doctrine, and they were not the same doctrine, and there was all of this stuff, and my judge was it's not worth the fight. Don't fight it. It's a non-precedential opinion that went out in print. So it's just kind of there are these moments that this happens, and I think that this is hugely important, and I couldn't agree more. I think that actually it's kind of devastating that we don't have more specialized courts.
I maybe should have Mike jump in with this question, or because I was going to drop a truth bomb. And
what's your truth bomb?
I'm braced.
So I'm not sure if people can handle.
Mike's braced.
So what if the Facebook Oversight Board adopted some Chevron-like rule, which said that they're going to defer to Facebook's interpretation of their terms of service? We'd all think that's ridiculous, because the role of Facebook Oversight Board is to provide oversight, right, to critique. And I think that's the way something like Gorsuch is thinking about it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Like, you don't, right, exactly. It's like they're like, the agency is like, in some sense, competitor / adversary / enemy. And so it's just a very different way of looking at
completely right.
kind of the structure of government. Anyway, I just want to throw that in.
No, I loved that. That was great. Mike, hi.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yep.
So my question, very briefly, I think about this a lot, with Marbury versus Madison. Here's the question of Congress thinks it's doing what it can do when it delegates some new original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. They think they can do it. Why shouldn't they think they can do it? And so the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do it because, the Constitution doesn't say you can. So therefore you can't. And then here the open question is, this is a different version between different branches about what delegation and non-delegation really mean. To be clear, I side with the idea of delegating stuff to expert agencies. I mean, I think that's an important thing to be able to do, but there have to be some limits on it. And so I don't think the conservative project, at least as far as non-delegation goes, is totally whack, although it does seem to be aimed at some targets more than others. So I just wanted to put that out there and see if you had any responses on that.
I think that's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julian.
I will only address the end of that question, and then Julian can talk about Marbury. I will say that I think there are lots of reasons to think that a non-delegation doctrine might be a good idea, but I think the way that we have seen it operate in practice is that it's enforced through political means, that Congress debates about whether and how it should delegate to agencies. And there are lots of things in the law that work like that. My favorite is just to think about the way taxes operate. There's nothing that says Congress can't impose a confiscatory tax on you or tax 100% of your income. There's no need for a constitutional barrier on that because we've got democratic restraints on it. And by the same token, I don't think there's any need for a judicially enforced doctrine that, basically duplicates what the kind of political safeguards we've already got in place. So that's my own view on non-delegation doctrine is we should get the courts out of this business. It can't draw the lines well. It's not really serving much of a purpose. All it does is arm politically motivated judges to blow up statutes they happen to dislike for whatever reason. And I think that's a pretty terrible path to go down. On Marbury, I'm going to let you handle this, although I will say I've always thought Marbury was pretty poorly reasoned.
Oh, reading Marbury is like playing count the errors is probably isn't the right word. Count the stolen bases.
Hank Aaron.
This pushes in the direction of something that I'd be interested in talking about, partly because I don't know how to think about it or how to think it through or how to think about what the right answer is, which is it kind of circles back to the persuadability question from early on, maybe before you actually did the official introduction. What difference work like this if it's persuasive on the merits, or this non-delegation paper if it's persuasive on the merits, or any project to try to engage the justices in a field where they have described themselves as being interested in how much it actually matters with the outcome. I actually think, notwithstanding the long-standing conservative FedSoc, et cetera, right, that's sort of the constellation of kind of conservative movement legal people is committed to the idea of deregulation and of distrusting agencies per Scott's observation about, hens and chickens and foxes, or whatever the right metaphor is. They are also deeply and persistently, at least some of them, I don't want to say they, some of them are deeply and persistently committed over time, including at the feet of like some of their great heroes, to the idea of judicial, maybe not minimalism, but sort of a view that if you're intervening when there's not, if you're intervening pursuant to the Constitution, I should say, when there's not some pretty good, pretty airtight, pretty clear reason to do so, when you're working in the spaces that we're going to use, and we'll use the word every time, penumbras and emanations, right? If you're in those penumbras and emanations, then you're full of shit. And, get your hands off the political process. They know better than you. Get the hell out of here for legitimacy reasons and for who's likely to produce the best result reasons. And I actually think that that's not all like a puppet show. I think that a lot of the people in that space, including at least some of the justices, actually feel the pull of that really strongly.
So, Julian, but is that what's sometimes called Thayerism?
Yeah.
The idea that court should only get involved when there's like a clear mistake, but when it's not a clear mistake, they should stay out. And if it, I have to say, like,
but what kind we're talking about appellate courts, either intermediary or like.
But
we're not talking about all
I guess even district courts, they can strike down legislation.
Well,
I mean,
yes, they can.
Yeah.
But are
they
they
have
also
the power of judicial review?
So are you talking about getting rid of like a fact-finding mission for a district court?
No.
Sorry, Scott. No, go ahead.
No, Julian. I was just following up on what you said.
I just misunderstood. So
the thing. So here's what I struggle with in engaging originalists on this debate, and like the overlapping circle of commitments: commitment to reduce government, commitment to Thayerianism, or to like judicial restraint in the face of reasonable democratic decision making, commitment to history. In like the moments where those different commitments are fight with one another, I don't know how to think about engaging conservatives, including some genuinely good faith conservatives, on the debate about whether there's a non-delegation doctrine, and have the start of the conversation be, you need to disprove the possibility of a non-delegation doctrine. You need to show identical practices that map on precisely to the full scope of, EPA regulation today. You have to show that they wouldn't be troubled by the following, 17 insane outcomes if, if Congress just delegates, they meaning the founders, that the founders wouldn't have been troubled by the delegation of all of congressional authority to a single person and then closing up shop. But I don't know what to do with that, because that whole mode of reasoning.
Mock it!
What's that?
Mock it!
I mean, but
I mean, like, seriously, but Nick speaks truth. And so does Scott. Like, this is like, I love this part of like Scott's entire like persona, which is, I think, like a testament to like a lot of some of this, the seriousness with which we take this like kind of legal. Sorry, I didn't want to like burst in. Sorry. Go ahead, Julian. I'm sorry, interrupted.
No, keep going. I like where you're going.
No, I love the idea of mocking it. Like, yes, Nick, like mock it, like make it humor, like bring in humor, because there is like this seriousness in which people take themselves and all of this stuff.
Kate, can I, I'm so happy you just brought this up, because I would like to wrap up with this question that you just asked. But
Yeah.
Can I interject? I want to hear this in a second, but can I just say something really important just happened to me, like this moment? I'm going to share it.
Oh, you got room rated. Holy shit.
What?
What?
I got room rated on your show.
He got room rated.
On your show, Scott. And a 9 out of 10, too. All right?
He's not even listening to us. He's scrolling through Twitter. I don't even know.
I popped it on notification. Anyway, I thought I'd share.
Decorum. I'm thumping my desk. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just, I'm just overcome with envy. Wow, that is very much. But I actually wanted to ask, apropos of what Kate just said, and just broaden it, which is that, like, both of you guys are very serious, not serious on Twitter, but you don't shit post. You play it straight. You're serious. Like, you're serious. Is that hard or is that natural?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me it's natural, but I think I'm a little bit cautious because I'm afraid. I mean, I know that I've got the ability to put my foot in my mouth in a fairly significant way, and I certainly don't. You know, when you're posting on Twitter, you know, you're always one tweet away from, you know, and so I think the caution probably comes from some recognition that I ought to be a little bit more careful.
Professorial, like serious, like
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to be funny like you, but maybe I'm just not that funny. I don't know. What do you think, Julian?
I'm really interested in this question.
I feel like I live in two very different spaces on Twitter, and now we come back to the point that Nick just made, which is you're just one tweet away from, and I want to believe that I can, and at some point it'll be shown that I can't. Which is, I think I love to engage sort of below the line and back and forth, really digging through kind of the ins and outs of an argument. I just think it's one of the fun things to do on Twitter. It's often a procrastination mechanism, but taking arguments seriously and working them through, I love that. And above the line, like if I have a thing to say that actually seems worth saying on substance, I mean, I want to take some time and put that thought in place. That's one side. The other side is I also think the world is a ludicrous and silly place. And I think that we're constantly presented in every domain of our lives of like funny, weird, strange stuff. And like, that's also part of me. And so I also say that, including in reference to scholarship sometimes. And I think that's where I come closest to a harsh edge at times.
But Scott,
I want to believe that I can do both things, but I'm not sure that I sometimes worry about whether I can, whether I lose audience. I mean, again, audience isn't me talking about that. Whether one might lose over time.
It might be worth it.
Yeah.
That's what
right,
I'm
Scott,
exactly.
You're the one who does the shit posting, but like, you know, you're the Yale law prof who's got the books and the sort of the philosophy, which has like
he's got the lofty post with which to play.
So like, well, but I don't know. Maybe that's why you can do it. Like, how do you have the confidence to shit post to the extent that you do?
I actually don't even know. I just don't even know, like, why I can, like, how I have that just chutzpah. I don't know. It's just, I guess, I don't know. Actually, I would say that the Twitter me is the real me. It really is the real me. And I feel like when people are like really serious and like always giving judicious opinions and tweets, that they're not being the real them. I feel like there's like I guess I want to ask is like, do you feel like it's actually inauthentic and it requires a degree of self-restraint?
Certainly requires self-restraint. I don't know that means it's inauthentic. I would think about it it's like, if you are out to dinner with your colleagues, you have a different attitude and approach than when you're just shooting the shit with your friends. And like, neither person is inauthentic. It's just, I think you have a different conception of who the audience is.
Yeah, I kind of see that. I will just say that, like, to what Scott is speaking to, I recently had kind of this experience in which my dean described like a chat that was happening in concert with a racial teach-in that we were doing at our school as like it being the chat being like thought bubbles. And I was like, no, the chat isn't thought bubbles. It's a chat. It is like social signaling. It is like, it is all of these, like, it is like a million things. It is not just thought bubbles. It's not like, right. It's not like this thing. And I don't begrudge him that comparison or analogy, but there is a balance in which I come to social media and understand, and I literally live my life thinking like the only thing that matters to me is whether I am like a good person and like whether I do something that is defensible in my own mind to another person. And if I have like harmed another person, if I say something I wouldn't say to a person directly to their face in some type of way, then like I won't say it to another person. And like sometimes that's really harsh, but like I would say it. And like but that's like the level in which I like live my life. And my social media feed is very much a reflection of, I think, exactly what Julian said, which is like, life is short. We have to be silly. We have to be fun. There have to be moments of levity. And then we can also be really serious scholars and very thoughtful humans. And I have to say, especially as a woman, this is something that is underrepresented. Like there is just like no
Space.
Like there's just like no funny like women that are also intellectual that like people take seriously, and it's very hard.
The risk is so much greater.
Yeah, the risk is so much greater. And like I don't even have children yet, and like there's like kind of like this like, but there is like this very real sense of like risk. And so I'm glad it came up. Like this is like a great conversation. I also have to say that I have been comforted by legal Twitter, and all of you, every single one of the people in this like Hollywood Square at various points when you've been responding on Twitter on like some kind of like lonely Wednesday night when I've been in quarantine and like there's nothing going on in the last year. Like it's been a great like refuge. And I think that like I don't know, I have a very real feeling about how much Twitter has become, and all of these other social media platforms have become, a proxy for in-person interactions. And like
I kind of says that is so true. And I just want to maybe not conclude, because I don't have the authority to conclude.
Conclude.
Okay, conclude. But just saying, I feel like in the last year that in some way law Twitter have been my colleagues.
Yes.
You know, I actually I mean it. I kind of interact with you guys more than I interact with my own colleagues because of COVID. And so I was wondering if you had that same experience.
It's been an incredibly lonely year, I think, for lots of different reasons. But I never thought of Twitter as important to me before. I thought of it as a fun diversion. I would say, looking back over the last year, Twitter's become important to me, which I don't know how to feel about that. But it's good for the reasons that you're saying.
No, I mean, you laugh, but like I've been saying this forever. Like that it is not just speech. These are like associational. Like these are network effects. Like call it like association principles. But like these are like really real like kind of connections that people have. And there is no internet exceptionalism. Real life is the internet, and the internet is real life. And so that's just going to become more and more the case, I think. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Julian, but like you were laughing and I was like, no, don't laugh. It's like a real thing.
Right.
So Nick, any last words?
No.
Were you buoyed by Twitter over the last year?
I was, although I will say, like I worry a bit about the Twitter addictiveness is a concern of mine, right? Both in the way that it can interrupt flows of thought, make it harder to get stuff down on the page, which at the end of the day makes me feel worse, not better. But I mean, look, it's been an enormous professional resource for me. I wouldn't be, I mean, like a lot of the kind of like role that I have is like speaking about, mostly healthcare stuff, but anything about the law I've done largely because of the platform Twitter's given me. It's given me inroads to the journalists. It's given me some credibility with the folk who actually run op-eds. It's allowed me to speak to a much broader audience. I wouldn't give it up. But you want to figure out a way to manage it. That said, thank God for some kind of social connection over the past year.
Yeah, it's been a weird year.
So basically, Nick is saying that he doesn't feel like we're colleagues. I'm sorry. Can we end the show now? Really, just end the show.
No, we're all
Twitter's good.
We can't have fun. We can't have fun anymore. We can't have colleagues anymore. We can't have anything anymore. Thanks a lot, Nick. I was having fun until.
But my room, Scott, looks fabulous.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, just
He
enjoy
used
your
us-
fuck. Never mind. Never fucking mind.
Okay, sorry. I have to end this show or I'm going to start crying. This has to go. Okay. So, Nick, I will contact you about my equity in the Bagley Mortenson partnership.
Awesome.
LLC. And Scott, you and I'll send you the divorce papers like really soon. You're gonna have to process those in state court.
I think you're going to have to send annulment papers because apparently
It's never
I've been
consummated.
really. Apparently, I've been imagining things for the past year, but whatever. We can't have fun anymore, and it's 22 hours and 51 minutes. Kate.
Yeah. 22 hours and 52 minutes from now. And until then, Scott.
We can't have fun anymore. We can't have a lot of things that I thought we had. Okay.